Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Martial Universe Season 10 Part 51 based on novel. So let's start. Suddenly, the peaceful Dao Sect began to boil like an oil pan as rushing wind sounds hurriedly appeared in the sky. After which, the disciples of Dao Sect were stunned when they saw the elders appearing in the sky consecutively. The name, which was emitted from Ying Huan's lips, was like a curse that broke the silence within Dao Sect. Huan. Another rushing wind sound appeared before a pretty figure showed up in the sky. Based on her appearance, she was none other than Ying Xiao. When she saw tears rolling down Ying Huan's face, she quickly stepped forward and grabbed the latter's hand. What's going on? Beside them, light flashed before Ying Xuanzi appeared. Then, he was startled when he saw Ying Huan's behavior. Soon after, he sighed. Over the past 3 years, as Ying Huan grew stronger, her demeanor became increasingly like that of an icy mountain. Hence, this was the first time in over 3 years that he saw her crying while being angry at the same time. Behind Ying Xuanzi, many elders as well as the 4 hall chiefs followed behind. Then, their eyes were all filled with shock when they saw Ying Huan's demeanor. Moreover, in their vicinity, were many figures standing in the sky. It turns out that there were many familiar faces including Jian Hao, Pang Tong, Wang Yang. It's Lin Dong, he has returned. Ying Huan bit her red lips and slowly said. What? Everyone was startled after hearing this. Immediately, wild joy rose on the face of Wang Yang, Pang Tong, and the rest. Then, they quickly surveyed their surroundings and said, Marshal Jr. Lin Dong is back. Where is he? Lin Dong? Ying Xiao and Ying Xuanzi were both startled. A thought passed through the latter's mind before he immediately scanned the entire Dao Sect. However, he quickly frowned and said, I did not sense Lin Dong's aura. Huan, you sure about this? Impossible. Ying Huan clenched her teeth and said, he is likely even more powerful than you now. Hence, if he wants to hide, there is no way you can find him. More powerful than father. Ying Xiao was slightly stunned. Meanwhile, the surrounding Dao Sect elders also faced each other. Lin Dong had only been away for 3 years. Back then, he had yet to enter the profound life stage. Therefore, how could he possibly surpass the sect master in merely 3 years? All of them looked at each other and immediately let out a bitter laughter. After all, they all knew how Ying Huan felt about Lin Dong. Perhaps this time around, that lass was simply missing him too much. All right, keep hiding. I want to see how long you can hide for. Ying Huan's pretty eyes were red as she continuously surveyed the mountain range while crying out furiously. However, soon after, she shut both of her eyes. Immediately, everyone felt their surrounding temperature dropping. Finally, white snowflakes began to fall from the sky in all directions, enveloping the entire Dao Sect. Standing on a distant cliff, when Lin Dong saw Dao Sect erupting into an uproar, he laughed bitterly. He never expected Ying Huan's senses to be so sharp. Previously, his emotions merely wavered for a moment and yet, it was still detected by her. However, the feelings within his heart became increasingly complicated when he saw the many familiar faces in the sky. Though he wanted to step forward, he felt as though each step weighed more than 1,000 kilograms and he could not move his feet. Snow? While Lin Dong was slightly absent-minded, he felt an icy cold air gushing towards him. After which, snowflakes fell before they melted on his body. Humph! Standing in the distant sky, Ying Huan suddenly opened her eyes. Then, with a cold snort, her body moved before she vanished. Oh no! Lin Dong had a bad hunch when he saw snowflakes melting on his body. Then, he hurriedly turned around and prepared to leave. However, his footsteps paused a moment later. That was because he saw that countless snowflakes were gathering in front of him, before an alluring figure appeared in the blink of an eye. That alluring figure was wearing a pale white dress. She had an exquisite figure and icy blue long hair poured down from her head. At this moment, tears were rolling down her beautiful face. Her pretty eyes, which also contained an icy blue color, had turned red as she glared at the young man, who seemed to have frozen completely. When Lin Dong saw that pretty familiar-looking face, various scenes, which were hidden deep within his heart, were suddenly unleashed. Immediately, his eyes became moist. Back in the unique Devil City, this young lady had awoken the strength that belonged to the other her in order to save him. As a result, her black hair turned blue. "What are you doing? I am not his match." Huan gazed upon Lin Dong's furious face. A smile of melancholy appeared on her pale little face. "Only by doing so, can I force father to show himself. I know that if this continues, it might end up starting a war between our two sects, but I do not wish to see you die in their hands. After all of you are used to my willfulness. In that case, allow me to act willfully one more time. I do not understand the code of brotherhood between men. If you insist on intervening, I will get father to beat you unconscious and bring you back." Tears continued to fall from that young lady's eyes. However, there was a pleading look in her eyes. "I only want you to live." She had placed aside her usual pride for him. This was all to protect the person she cared the most about. Scenes from the past churned within his mind. They seemed so familiar, as though they had taken place yesterday. Lin Dong's nose twitched and there seemed to be something rolling within his heart. Ying Huan looked at that face, whose emotions were rapidly changing. Over these 3 years, he seemed to have lost a little weight. She wondered just how much he had suffered over the last 3 years. She bit her red lips tightly before her eyes became completely red. All the yearning, which she had suppressed over the past 3 years, surged forth like a fountain at this moment. When she recalled how he refused to show up previously, her yearning turned into anger. Soon after, she clenched her hand, before snow gathered and directly transformed into a snow longsword. "Hide! I dare you to keep hiding!" She gritted her teeth, while her raised voice was filled with anger. The snow longsword jerked before it directly tore through space. Then, it pierced towards Lin Dong with lightning-like speed. Lin Dong sighed helplessly after he saw this. However, he did not dodge that sword. Finally, that sword did strike Lin Dong's body. However, it turned into a snowflake and scattered the instant they made contact. After that snowflake scattered, an angry pretty figure followed behind. Then, she used her small hands to heavily pound Lin Dong's chest. Soon after, her action slowed, before she finally burst into tears. Meanwhile, her suppressed cries contained her bitter yearning and worry that was accumulated over the last 3 years. When Lin Dong saw that girl, who was leaning on his shoulder while crying in a heartbreaking fashion, he involuntarily lifted his head and inhaled a deep breath of icy cold air. Then, he slowly extended his arm and embraced her narrow waist. When she detected his actions, that girl in his embrace cried even louder. It looked as though she wanted to vent all the bitterness and sorrow that she had suffered over the past 3 years. Her cries continued for a very long time, before they gradually died down. Following which, a soft cough sounded from a short distance away. Lin Dong lifted his head and saw Ying Xuanzi, Ying Xiaoxiao, Wang Yang as well as the Hall Chief and Deputy Chief of the Desolate Hall, Chen Zhen and Wu Dao, standing at a distance away. Behind them, countless disciples from Dao Sect had all flooded over to this place. Clearly, they had heard something as well. Meanwhile, there seemed to be heated cries being faintly transmitted. Their cries were seemingly trying to inform others that martial brother Lin Dong had returned. The entire mountain range was packed with disciples from Dao Sect. Ying Huan seemed to have also detected the huge commotion occurring around her. Immediately, a flash of red rose on her face, which typically had little emotion. After which, she bit her red lips, clenched her small fist before she gave Lin Dong a jab. Only then, did she turn around and return to Ying Xiaoxiao's side. The latter hurriedly hugged her upon seeing this. Meanwhile, she felt relieved in her heart. Her sister had been as cold as an ice mountain over the past 3 years, and it has been a long while since she saw the latter acting in this manner. When Lin Dong saw those familiar faces, his mouth became a little dry. His heart, which did not even waver when up against thousands of soldiers, was evidently at a loss. After which, he cupped his hands towards Ying Xuanzi and said, "Ying, Sect Chief Ying." His words caused Ying Xuanzi's body to stiffen. The one extra word made a vast difference. Standing beside him, Ying Xiaoxiao and Ying Huan were slightly startled. The former hurriedly said, "Lin Dong, do not blame father. He had his own difficulties back then." Lin Dong laughed bitterly. His expression was complicated as he said, "Regardless, I withdrew from Dao Sect back then. Therefore, by barging in uninvited today, I have offended you guys." "Nonsense!" A furious cry suddenly sounded. Immediately, everyone turned to look, only to see a red-faced Wu Dao staring at Lin Dong, before he furiously cried, "You were brought into Dao Sect by this old man. If you want to leave our sect, you will have to ask me for permission. What do you treat Dao Sect as? If everyone could quit just as simply as you wanted to, what would our sect become?" Although Wu Dao was scolding Lin Dong, his eyes were filled with tears. Back then, he was the one who discovered Lin Dong and brought him to Dao Sect. Moreover, he also did his best to groom Lin Dong. In fact, after he learned that Lin Dong was forced by Yuan Gate to leave the sect back at the unique Devil City, he was so furious that he wanted to head right to Yuan Gate to demand an explanation. Fortunately, someone stopped him in the end. Lin Dong was quiet. He was indebted to Wu Dao and he had always respected the latter. However, the Eastern Xian region was different from the Demon region. The sect mentality was extremely prevalent here, and once one entered a sect, it was equivalent to joining a family. Hence, it was an extremely serious offense to quit one sect. Marshal Junior Lin Dong, the disciples of Dao Sect have been anticipating your return. Wang Yang sighed softly. Marshal Junior Lin Dong. At a short distance away, Pang Tong had a solemn expression. Meanwhile, his eyes contained an excited tinge that was difficult to hide, as he said, "You should be aware of the current situation in the Eastern Xian region. Moreover, you should also know the predicament that our Dao Sect is currently in. I, Pang Tong, might not be very knowledgeable, but I know that Marshal Junior Lin Dong will not abandon his fellow martial brothers in Dao Sect. Just like how you did not abandon us back at Unique Devil City. Over the past year, many martial brothers from our Dao Sect have died in the hands of Yuan Gate. If it was not because of little senior sister Huan, our Dao Sect might have been wiped out already. Hence, our Dao Sect will never forgive Yuan Gate. Therefore, I hope that Marshal Junior Lin Dong can repeat that sentence that he said back then." Pang Tong's voice paused, before he suddenly knelt down with one knee on the ground. Meanwhile, there were tears rolling down his rugged face. "Marshal Junior Lin Dong, please strengthen our Dao Sect." Bang bang bang. Behind him, that black cluster of Dao Sect disciples all knelt down. Amongst that rolling sea of humans, every single face was filled with hatred towards Yuan Gate as well as a hopeful expression. "Marshal Brother Lin Dong, please strengthen our Dao Sect. Marshal Brother Lin Dong, please strengthen our Dao Sect." Low and deep thunderous voices resounded across the sky. Meanwhile, that unknown emotion heavily collided against Lin Dong's heart. At this moment, a massive heartache finally struck his chest, causing his eyes to turn red involuntarily. "Strengthen our Dao Sect." Low and thunderous roars gathered together, before they boomed across the entire mountain range. At this moment, it looked as though the mountains were trembling. Lin Dong's eyes were red as he gazed at the black sea of people in front of him. Each and every one of their faces had become flushed thanks to the emotions within their hearts. However, the gazes that were cast towards him were filled with a near fanatical trust and hope. Over the past year, Yuan Gate had waged a war. Hence, the flames of war had surrounded the entire Eastern Xian region. Moreover, Dao Sect was the first to be hit and Yuan Gate had attacked them many times. If it was not because Ying Huan's strength had soared, it was likely that Dao Sect would have been reduced into rubble, while countless Dao Sect disciples would have perished along with the sect. Nonetheless, even though they were in a precarious situation, none of them gave up. That was because there was still hope in their hearts. Back at the unique Devil region, the disciples of Dao Sect were also being butchered miserably. However, that figure eventually showed up and turned things around. though the situation that they were currently in was several times more dangerous compared to before, that figure had already gotten hold of their hearts. Unknowingly, he had almost become a religion. In fact, they believed that as long as he returned, they would be able to tackle any situation, regardless of how hopeless it may seem. Ying Xiaoxiao's eyes were red as she stared at this scene. Then, she involuntarily wiped off the tears rolling down her face. It was the first time over the last year, whereby she saw the Dao Sect disciples acting in such an excited fashion. Lin Dong, come back. All your martial brothers from Dao Sect really need you. Ying Xiaoxiao softly said. Ying Huan's pretty eyes stared at Lin Dong, whose eyes were currently red and whose body was trembling gently. Promptly, she realized that the emotions with the latter's heart must also be churning like waves. Lin Dong, come back. Chen Zhen sighed softly before he said. Marshal Senior Lin Dong, we've been waiting for you to return and to lead us to attack Yuan Gate. Countless Dao Sect disciples cried out in unison. Their eyes were all filled with great hope and anticipation. Lin Dong inhaled a deep breath of icy cool air, as he suppressed the churning waves in his heart. As he looked at the countless glimmering pairs of eyes, it was a long while later before a smile finally surfaced on the corner of his lips. Sect Master, may I know if Dao Sect will still accept an unruly disciple like me? Lin Dong looked at Ying Xuanzi, before he asked in a slow and hoarse voice. Immediately, wild joy crazily surged out from the eyes of every Dao Sect disciple. Soon after, hot tears rolled down from many of their eyes. Martial brother Lin Dong has returned. Yes. Yes. As long as you do not bear a grudge against me. At this moment, despite Ying Xuanzi's status and his mental fortitude, his elderly eyes began to redden. Then, he cried out in a hoarse voice. Once Lin Dong returned to his Dao Sect, it would undoubtedly rejuvenate their entire sect. Marshal Senior Lin Dong. Countless disciples from Dao Sect erupted in celebrations after Ying Xuanzi's voice sounded. After which, they swarmed over and lifted Lin Dong into the air. Subsequently, many incomparably joyous cheers sounded as Lin Dong was tossed around in the air. At a short distance away, when Ying Yuanzi saw this scene, he sighed and said, all of a sudden, I truly regret my decision back then. Suddenly, it looked as though he had aged significantly. All these years, he tried to carefully protect Dao Sect and guard his countless little disciples, whom he regarded as his children. As such, he had sacrificed far too much for them. However, on hindsight, it seems like he should not have acted so cautiously. Father, you are not at fault. None of us blame you. Ying Xiaoxiao felt a heartache when she saw his conduct. Immediately, she gently tugged his elderly palm before she softly comforted him. Beside him, another long jade-like hand hesitated for a moment. After which, that hand extended and held Ying Xuanzi's other hand. This caused Ying Xuanzi to be startled. He turned his head and saw Ying Huan gently biting her red lips. Although she continued to remain silent, her face, which had only shown an icy cold expression towards him for 3 years, once again regained a little warmth. At this moment, tears finally rolled down Ying Xuanzi's face. His youngest daughter had finally forgiven him. On a mountain peak outside of Dao Sect, a mirror forged from Yuan power was reflecting what was happening within Dao Sect. In fact, it seemed as though the cheers within the sect could be heard here as well. First Elder Zhu Li, Liu Qing, and the rest were staring at the scene reflected by the mirror. Although they did not know the exact relationship between Lin Dong and that faction, the heartfelt emotions emitted from everyone could still be detected by them. As such, everyone ended up sighing emotionally. Little Martin looked at the mirror before he sighed softly in his heart. He knew how Lin Dong felt about Dao Sect. After all, that sect was indeed worthy of Lin Dong's concern. How much longer are you going to cry for? Little Martin shook his head somewhat helplessly. Then, he looked at the red-eyed Anran, who was crying continuously as she stared at the mirror. In fact, even her sleeves were wet. It's none of your business. Anran's nose was slightly red. Meanwhile, she was still sobbing as she spoke. Marshal Senior Lin Dong has returned. Our martial brothers in Dao Sect have all been waiting for him. We have always believed that he will eventually return. Although it's good to have faith, you shouldn't place all your hopes on others. If you do not work hard and train, no one can save you. Little Martin said in a faint voice. Anran widened her big eyes furiously when she heard Little Martin's words, which completely ruined the mood. Gritting her teeth, she retorted, "Nonsense. Every Dao Sect disciple has been training hard and working our asses off. No one was slacking off." Little Martin glanced at her but did not speak. His lazy demeanor caused Anran to grit her teeth furiously. Why are you so repulsive? Why is it that someone as awesome as Martial Senior Lin Dong has such a repulsive brother? Repulsive? Little Martin was startled. In his heart, he wanted to laugh. However, soon after, his handsome face suddenly turned vicious before he said, "Who are you talking about? Do you really believe that I do not dare to kill you?" Anran screamed in fear after she saw the fearsome expression on Little Martin's face. Immediately, she scurried and fled to the back of Eldershire. After which, she stuck her little head out before she glared at Little Martin. Little Martin involuntarily laughed when he saw this. At the same time, standing beside him, Little Flame leaned closer before he grinned and said, "Second brother, it seems like you enjoy fooling around with this little girl." Little Martin was startled. He immediately coughed softly before he gave a kick forward. "Foolish tiger, what nonsense are you sprouting?" Little Flame laughed. There was an unknown emotion within his laughter. The cheers and celebrations within Dao Sect continued for a long time, before they finally started to die down. The various hall chiefs also smilingly dismissed everyone and instructed those reluctant little fellows to go back to their training. When Lin Dong saw his tattered clothes, he didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. These guys were simply a little too excited. Nonetheless, it has been many years since he felt such a heartwarming sensation. "Are you all right?" A gentle voice sounded in front of Lin Dong. However, that voice seemed to contain a faint trace of cold air, which could never be erased. Lin Dong lifted his head and saw Ying Huan standing in front of him. When he saw her icy blue long hair, his heart began to ache gently. However, he still maintained a smile before he nodded. "Lin Dong, since you have returned to Dao Sect, why don't you become an elder?" After Ying Xuanzi recovered his spirits, he led a crowd over before he asked with a laugh. Given his eyesight, he was naturally able to tell that Lin Dong was completely different from before. In fact, what Ying Huan said previously was indeed true. As of now, Lin Dong was more powerful than him, the sect master. "It's fine. Just let me be a disciple of the Desolate Hall. I quite fancy that position." Lin Dong shook his head. He was not really interested in an elder position. However, he did miss the days when he was training at the Desolate Hall. In that case, my Desolate Hall will definitely be the #1 hall. I want to see who dares to fight with us for that position." Wu Dao glanced at the 3 other hall chiefs in a pleased manner and laughed. The remaining 3 hall chiefs shook their heads helplessly. How could someone skirt the rules like this? "It's fine. I am a disciple of the Sky Hall. Therefore, even if he goes to Desolate Hall, our Sky Hall has no reason to fear." Ying Huan laughed. That rare smile gave off a cold refreshing sensation, which was similar to the sensation one felt the instant an ice mountain melted. It caused one to be involuntarily drawn to her. Although this girl was becoming increasingly beautiful and now looked more elegant than before, the pride drilled deep within her bones was exactly the same as that 3 years ago. "That's right, Sect Master. I still have some friends and subordinates outside. Can you open the formation and let them in?" When Lin Dong recalled that Little Martin and the rest were still waiting outside, he quickly asked. "I?" Ying Xuanzi nodded without hesitation. He waved his sleeve before the sect guarding formation covering Dao Sect shook. Then, it gradually disappeared. Moments after the formation disappeared, many rushing wind sounds appeared from a short distance away. Following which, a black cloud rushed over. Their frightening and ferocious aura surged towards the sky. This ferocious aura, which had suddenly showed up, immediately caused the faces of countless Dao Sect disciples to turn pale. Initially, they thought that Yuan Gate had invaded them once again. However, their anxiety quickly died down after Ying Xuanzi dispatched some people to calm them down. Only after they realized that it was a group of men brought back by Marshal Senior Lin Dong did their anxiety turn into curiosity. A black cloud swept over. After which, they landed on a spacious training platform in Dao Sect. Thousands of black armored tiger-devouring army soldiers stood like statues, and they did not move at all. Meanwhile, their breathing were in complete unison. In fact, their auras and brutality even caused Ying Xuanzi's expression to change. After all, although his Dao Sect disciples have experienced many bitter fights over the last year, they were still greatly lacking compared to this tiger-devouring army, whose soldiers have all climbed up from piles of corpses. After the tiger-devouring army showed up, a couple of figures leapt towards the mountain cliff where Lin Dong was located. After which, all of them revealed themselves. Even with Ying Xuanzi's mental fortitude, shock still surged into his eyes when little Martin, First Elder Zhu Li, Liu Qing, and the rest appeared. To begin with, he was an ultimate samsara stage expert. Moreover, his strength had also surged over the past 3 years and he even vaguely comprehended reincarnation will. However, the ripples being emitted by the 7 of them were much stronger than him. In other words, other than Little Flame, all 7 of them were samsara stage experts who had touched reincarnation. Beside him, a tinge of shock also flashed across Ying Huan's icy blue eyes when she saw little Martin and the rest. Ying Xuanzi and the rest turned to face each other. Though they were shocked, immense joy also surged into their hearts. Clearly, Lin Dong had returned well prepared. This fellow. In merely 3 years, not only did his strength soar, but he was no longer alone. Beside him, stood a terrifying lineup which could even flip the entire Eastern Xian region upside down. At this moment, Ying Xuanzi and the rest slowly calmed themselves down. Then, they looked at Lin Dong with a complicated expression in their eyes. It seems like the disciples of Dao sects were not mistaken. No problem is too big to handle once Marshal Senior Lin Dong returns. It was exactly the same as before. Back at the unique devil region, that man had shown up at the very last moment and reversed the situation. On the cliff, Lin Dong introduced First Elder Zhu Li and the rest. As for Little Martin and Little Flame, Ying Xuanzi and the rest already knew of them and their relationship with Lin Dong. First Elder Zhu Li and the rest were rather courteous towards Ying Xuanzi. Although it was mostly because of their relationship with Lin Dong, Ying Xuanzi was also rather powerful, making him a worthy individual in their eyes. Sect Master, tell us about Yuan Gate. We have recently returned from Demon Region and do not clearly understand Yuan Gate's situation. When he mentioned Yuan Gate, a chilling light surged in Lin Dong's black pupils. Yuan Gate started the war a year ago, however, they only attacked other super sects back then, and even found some justification. Although the other super sects were somewhat unhappy with Yuan Gate's domineering actions, they did not wish to offend Yuan Gate because of matters that were not their own. Ying Xuanzi laughed bitterly and continued, who would have guessed that the increasingly savage Yuan Gate will directly declare war against all of the super sects a short while after. Moreover, the most astonishing thing was that Yuan Gate's power had soared to a rather terrifying level. Their samsara stage super experts had rapidly rose in number. The other super sects were completely incapable of resisting. In the end, they were gradually defeated one by one. Now, besides those who have surrendered and allied themselves with Yuan Gate, only our Dao Sect and 9 Heavens Supreme Purity Palace remain amongst the Eastern Xian region's super sects. Half a year ago, Yuan Gate dispatched a huge number of troops to attack Dao Sect. Amongst them, there was a total of 5 samsara stage experts. It was fortunate that Huan managed to stop 3 of them. Although we stopped them in the end, Huan was also injured. Ying Xuanzi said. There should be one known as Zhao Kuei amongst the 3, right? He has already been killed by me. Lin Dong faintly smiled and said. If I encounter those 3 again, they will not be my match. Ying Huan glanced at Lin Dong as her red lips raised slightly. Although she had said such words, the cold aura from her body seemed to weaken a little at this moment. However, some of these Yuan Gate samsara stage experts do not have stable auras. They do not seem to have steadily grown to this level, but were instead artificially strengthened by someone. Lin Dong chuckled. Soon after, he remarked in a low voice. Yes. Ying Xuanzi nodded. Moments later, he bitterly smiled and said, however, this is already very frightening. In the past, the power of the samsara stage was enough for one to become the leader of a sect. They have likely borrowed the power of the Yimo. Lin Dong slowly said. Yimo? Upon hearing this, Ying Xuanzi's expression changed slightly. At his level, he naturally knew of some information related to the Uproar and understood how terrifying they were. Ying Huan's shapely eyebrows faintly wrinkled. A strange light flitted across her ice-blue pupils. When I was in the chaotic demon sea, I met the previous generation of 3 little kings. I discovered the existence of the devil seed within their bodies. Moreover, the people who were dispatched by Yuan Gate to kill me later on all had the power of the Yimo. Lin Dong softly said. This Yuan Gate is truly too much, they still dare to dispatch men to kill you after chasing you away. Ying Xuanzi was furious upon hearing this. Although Lin Dong had made it seem as if it was no big deal, everyone knew that it would have definitely been a terrible battle. It is no issue. Everyone they sent died in the end after all. Lin Dong shook his head. After pondering for some time, he continued, what about those 3 old dogs? How powerful are they now? Ying Xuanzi was stunned. Soon after, he secretly chuckled. Turns out that Lin Dong was referring to the Yuan Gate's 3 titans. Ever since the war started, the Qian Yuanzi trio have practically never showed their faces. Never showed their faces. It was now Lin Dong's turn to be stunned. Yes. Ying Xuanzi nodded his head with a grave expression. Clearly shown terror was not the thing that made one worry, it was the unknown that truly caused one to feel fear. The situation in the eastern Xian region had already developed to such a state, yet the 3 Yuan Gate sect masters were completely silent. This instead caused one to feel uneasy. In addition, according to some information that we obtained, Yuan Gate seems to be up to something big recently. My senses tell me that they are targeting our Dao Sect. After all, Yuan Gate hates our Dao Sect to the core, yet we've been able to survive all this time. This time, they will surely have a method to annihilate our Dao Sect. Ying Xuanzi slowly said. However, Lin Dong's return should not be known by time for the time being. Given our Dao Sect's current strength, we are not afraid of them. Ying Xiao interjected. With the support of Lin Dong's huge force, Dao Sect no longer needed to be constantly on the edge like before. Something big, huh? Lin Dong coldly chuckled, since that is so, we'll have to properly receive them. Ying Xuanzi nodded his head. The current Lin Dong was clearly no longer the little Dao Sect disciple from 3 years ago. His boldness and strength had already surpassed a sect master like Ying Xuanzi. With Lin Dong around, even Ying Xuanzi felt a little more confident. Good. As long as Yuan Gate dares to come again, our Dao Sect will definitely settle all of our debts. After chatting with Lin Dong for a while, Ying Xuanzi and the rest started to leave. Little Martin, First Elder Zhu Li and the rest also followed suit. No one knew if it was intentional, but they left Lin Dong and Ying Huan alone, and no one would bother them for some time. As the crowd dispersed, the atmosphere between the two became much more silent. Lin Dong gazed at the slender and soft body of the girl beside him, and once again looked at her long ice-blue hair. A faint chilling aura enveloped her body, causing him to softly sigh, "You've used too much of the power that does not belong to you." Within his voice was a little reproach. However, the regret within was even greater. Upon hearing his words, Ying Huan glared at him. Soon after, she gritted her pearly white teeth as she replied, "What else could I do? Since you were no longer around, I needed to protect Dao Sect. Moreover, if I could only powerlessly watch you almost die like 3 years ago, I would rather become an emotionless ice mountain." Towards the end, even her voice had become much softer. A faint crimson-red flush seemed to flash across her cold face. "Then I will better protect you in future, so please utilize that power less." Lin Dong's heart warmed a little as he smiled. Ying Huan's beautiful eyes stared at Lin Dong. Her crescent moon-shaped eyebrows seemed to arch in joy, but she turned her head away as she spoke. I will not believe someone who knocked me unconscious at the important juncture. This lass still held a grudge. Lin Dong helplessly smiled. I was going to risk it all back then. Knocking you unconscious was better than letting you helplessly watch me die. Can your hair turn back? Lin Dong asked as he looked at Ying Huan's long ice blue hair and sighed in his heart. Why? You think it doesn't look good? Ying Huan suddenly turned her head and glared at Lin Dong. Lin Dong dryly laughed as he rapidly shook his head. He knew that Ying Huan should be aware of certain things, but it was because of such awareness that she was so sensitive. Ying Huan slightly lowered her head. Moments later, she lifted it up again as she softly said to Lin Dong, it's been a long time since you've returned to Dao Sect. I'll take you on a stroll. She had already walked forward while she spoke. Lin Dong's eyes had a rather complicated expression as he slowly followed. The two wandered within Dao Sect. Pills rivers hung in the sky, while rumbling noises echoed into the distance. Huge groups of Dao Sect disciples would walk past from time to time. However, those ambiguous gazes would pause on the duo while giggles could be heard from far away. Lin Dong felt a little helpless due to these gazes, but Ying Huan, who was walking half a step ahead, rather enjoyed them. So much so that a faint smile hung on her usually frosty face. It was an extremely moving sight. However, a smile also surfaced on Lin Dong's face as he watched that lovely figure. Her long ice blue hair shimmered under the sunlight. Such a feeling was not bad at all. Do you know what that is? At the front, Ying Huan's footsteps suddenly stopped. She tilted her head back slightly, as her slender jade-like finger pointed to the front. Her beautiful face had become extremely gentle. Lin Dong lifted his head, only to see a horizontal pill river. The towering giant tree within the pill river covered a radius of no less than 1,000 feet. Astonishing energy undulations spread out from the giant tree, while numerous fist-sized fruits hung from it. These fruits were ripe with abundant energy. This is the immortal Yuan ancient tree. Lin Dong gazed at this ancient tree in amazement. Soon after, he joyfully asked, Yes. Ying Huan smiled, spellbound as she looked upon the ancient tree. In that moment, the cold aura around her body had completely vanished. She was just like the charming and lively girl from back then. Lin Dong's eyes also held complicated feelings and nostalgia. To obtain this immortal Yuan ancient tree seed back then, the young girl had remained behind to stop their formidable enemies. However, he had hastily rushed back to save her. In a way, this immortal Yuan ancient tree was something they had worked together to protect. The two wore gentle expressions as they stood under the immortal Yuan ancient tree in silence. Unknowingly, the sun began to set. Lin Dong gradually recovered from his daze. He gently patted Ying Huan's shoulders as he smiled and said, How long do you plan on standing here? When she saw that this blockhead had broken the mood, Ying Huan could not help but roll her eyes at him. Such a mannerism was a little flirtatious. Let's go to the desolate hall. Lin Dong stretched his waist as he continued, It's already been so long, I have to fulfill my promise after all. Promise? Ying Huan was taken aback. Soon after, she was rather amused as she said, You mean the Great Desolate Tablet? Fancy you remembering. Your 2-year promise has long since passed. If it was not for me, the Great Desolate Tablet would have long died due to being swindled by you. Lin Dong felt somewhat awkward. It was indeed his fault, and it was fortunate that Ying Huan was here to help, or else. The Great Desolate Tablet said that the power of 2 ancestral symbols are needed to deal with the Yimo King sealed under it. I should be able to settle things now. Lin Dong said. Ancestral symbol, huh? I also have one. Ying Huan softly said. She extended a slender snow-white hand as snowflakes gathered at the center of her palm. An ancient symbol suffused with ice patterns slowly appeared within it. This is. Lin Dong gazed at the ancient symbol in Ying Huan's hand as his pupils involuntarily tightened a little. The ice ancestral symbol? Let's go and deal with that troublesome thing. Ying Huan flipped her jade-like hand as the ice ancestral symbol faded. Without looking at Lin Dong, she turned and left. Wait. Lin Dong suddenly spoke up. Ying Huan tilted her head back and looked at him with her beautiful eyes. You. Lin Dong gazed into her ice-blue eyes, but his hands could not help but slowly clench into fists. You will always be Ying Huan, right? Ying Huan did not reply. She deeply looked at Lin Dong. A long while later, the corners of her mouth curled as she lightly skipped forward with her hands behind her back. Soon after, a lovely voice was heard. That will depend on your performance. This video will end here.